Me too. My dad is a pastor, so I like to keep it up.
What is that place over there? And I asked them
Okay.
questions.
Okay. That is the Newport Yacht Club. Or the Newport Yacht Club. They actually, all of these boats can go down here and they have a fuel station.
I don't want to leave it, docked.
You like Silver Town? Hello everyone, welcome to Newport Harbor. Do we have any Newport locals here? That's a resounding no. That's great. That means I can make things up. Like Captain Perrin said, my name is Austin. I'm going to be giving you your tour today. I'm going to start off by saying that Newport was founded in 1639. It was founded on the ideas of freedom of religion. If you know anything about history, you know that Europe back in the colonial days were run by the church, which was also the state. Here we do have a separation of church and state, but back then they were told that you can only worship one way, and if you didn't, then you kind of came over here to America to seek a safe place to worship in your own fashion. That's why if you go up into town, you'll see a lot of different kinds of churches. You'll see Episcopalian, Catholic, Protestant, so all the various different kinds. They're up there. I think there is a Jewish synagogue up at the top of the hill, so anything you feel the right to be, you can come over here and worship. The harbor, after its foundation in 1639, it quickly became one of the biggest economic powerhouses here in America, especially in terms of trading. We did trade a lot of rum, and we did take part in the slave trade, unfortunately, and that was a big trade here in Newport. The first couple interesting things to note are these boats right here. These are called 12-meter boats, the one that says Weatherly on it. The 12-meter boats race in the America's Cup, which is a world-renowned race, and it's close every year because the boats are the same exact size. They're 12 meters long, obviously. The mast is about 68 feet tall, and I believe the masts are taller than that. The boat itself is 68 feet tall. Intrepid itself won 2, Weatherly won 1, and we defended that America's Cup title for the longest of times. The boats are, like I said, the same, so it comes down to the quality of the sails and the quality of the sailors to determine who wins. Over here we do have the Newport Yacht Club. People will pay a fee to become a member of the club. They can keep their boats there, enjoy the fine dining there, and have other couple number of perks for being a member of that club. One interesting boat on this side of the harbor, you're going to see a little gray boat sticking out, the furthest named Destiny. That's Captain Perrin's boat, so we can all point and laugh if we want to make him go really, really fast. Back here there are a couple of dark buildings. That is known as Long Wharf. Long Wharf has been appearing on maps up to 400 years ago. So that's kind of the hustle and bustle of Newport that made it such a big economic powerhouse. You had a lot of people coming here to trade spices, rum, fish, and other seafood delicacies, stuff like that. In addition to that, that's actually the location of the world's largest sanctioned mass execution up until the Civil War. They caught a pirate ship of about 36 different pirates. The boat was named Ranger. They tried all of the men on board, found 26 of them guilty. Those 26 men were executed there and buried on Goat Island, halfway between high tide and low tide, so that even in death their souls may never rest, which is terrifying to think about. Back there in that little cove, you can see the Newport Lobster Shack. That's only one of the fresh fish places you can eat here. Which is part of the reason why it's such a great tourist town. There's some fresh fish, which is in part because of boats like this, the 5Js. The 5Js, although it is very, very rusty, it is Coast Guard inspected, certified, and it goes out 3 to 4 times a week. The 5Js is a typical bait boat, so it will drag the bottom of the sea and get baits for all these other fishing boats to help contribute to Newport's seafood industry. We have some of the freshest lobster and clam here. The state fishing pier used to be flooded with hundreds of different boats always going in and out, bringing in tons and tons of fish. But due to a series of unfortunate overfishing, we've had to downscale a little bit. Nevertheless, these boats still bring in tons of seafood of all the varieties. They did try and film kind of a spin-off of Deadliest Catch here. They tried to do a version with lobster as opposed to deep sea tuna, but they quickly found that lobster were significantly less interesting. Nothing exciting ever happened, and they canceled the show before it even reached the production stage. If we look further down along the coast to the left, you'll see the shipyard. You'll see a lot of mega yachts there, series of boats. If you are anybody or have a very significantly sized boat, you're probably going to dock your boat there. The fees go about $10 per foot per week. So the biggest boat, Limitless, we'll see it soon. I think some of you can see it, but not all of you. Limitless will dock there for about $50,000 a month, because Limitless is a 317 foot boat. You'll get boats here from all over the world, and people come here actually because hurricane insurance is cheaper than it is in other places of the world. So they'll come up here during the summer to enjoy the beautiful weather, less oppressive than the South, and a lot cheaper than the Bahamas or the Caribbean at this time of the year. I mentioned Limitless before. It's this one right here. It's the longest boat we have in the harbor today. It is 317 feet long and is owned by the CEO of Victoria's Secret. So if you've ever bought anything from Victoria's Secret, you've personally financed this boat. Congratulations. You can't do it right now, not this year, but on any other most typical years, you can charter this boat out for $1.2 million a week. You and your 24 closest friends can go and enjoy being waited on hand and foot by a crew of about 20 people, including the captains, the engineers, the deckhands, etc., etc., etc. It's really interesting, this actual compartment here on the side, they'll have a whole other boat on the inside, so that's just kind of a testament to how big Limitless is. Moving forward, you're going to have this racing boat, Argo. Argo is the type of racing boat. It's called a trimaran, because it has 3 different compartments to it. And Argo is here for the transatlantic race. So obviously, Argo and a couple other boats are racing to cross the Atlantic Ocean. Zenji is another racing sailboat, just a different style. It does look like a luxury sailboat, but it is a racing one, and that can reach up to speeds 50 plus miles an hour. As we round this corner, we're going to be turning to face Goat Island. One interesting thing is on that end of Goat Island, if you kind of peek under over the bridge, you can see a lighthouse. That is the Newport Harbor Lighthouse. That lighthouse stood and was operated by a family, a gentleman who had a wife and 2 daughters, up until a U.S. submarine ran into it and shook up the foundation so much that they had to relocate to a different location while they renovated the lighthouse. During this process, they did decide to make the lighthouse electric and effectively put this family out of a job. This boat right here, Aurora, the rustic-looking sailboat, that's a typical example of a lobster boat before engines were invented. These boats obviously would use sail power to go out and fish for lobster. So imagine those kind of boats like Aurora lined up all against the state fishing pier, contributing to Newport's seafood industry. Goat Island itself boasts a population of exactly 0 goats. It's called Goat Island. It's called Goat Island because the colonials used to keep their livestock there. There did not used to be a causeway. The only way to and from the island was ferry, so they didn't have to spend resources or finances on building pastures or protecting their livestock from animals. This allowed livestock to become one of the biggest industries here. After the livestock industry kind of died down in the colonies, a series of forts were built here. I think 7 forts up until the Civil War, when they built a torpedo factory. That torpedo factory was one of the largest sources of ammunition for the U.S. through several different wars up until the end of World War II. That torpedo factory is mostly run by women. As you know, women could not be drafted. So as the men were off fighting in Europe, the women would stay on the home front to help build weapons and maintain the factories and collect bonds and stuff for the war effort. Like I said, a series of 7 forts. This building right here, it says Goat Island Marina. This is actually the last remaining part of the torpedo factory after it was no longer in use and fell into disarray. This is the only thing that remains, and today it serves as the marina, hosting boats such as the Bella Vita. The Bella Vita is actually another charter boat. Like I said, Limitless is not being chartered for now, but the Bella Vita is. You can do this one for $750,000 a week. You and your 14 closest friends can go on and enjoy a week and future financial troubles. From end to end, Go Island is about a mile long, so it used to be stuffed with livestock. Today, it no longer holds forts or anything. It was private. It was sold up in a private auction, a blind auction, and after a week of bidding, they opened up the envelopes, and the highest bidder was a man from Fall River. This man owned the rights to spandex, so he ran all those factories and innovated spandex and stuff like that. He ended up buying this island here for $160,000. He tore down the torpedo factory and ended up renovating it so that it was now a series of condominiums and such. So now it is a bunch of condos. You do have Gurney's on the other end, which is said to be the ugliest building in Newport with its odd angles and bright yellow structure. But it is built to be hurricane proof, and obviously because it's still standing, it's doing a pretty great job of that. This boat, Nefertiti, is another example of a 12-meter charter boat. This particular boat is crewed by the crew of Columbia. Columbia won last year's America's Cup, so bringing the title back to Newport. Unfortunately, she's getting a little bit of a nose job right now. She got into an accident, so Nefertiti's taking her place in that crew. You can go and charter with them, that world champion crew, for 2 hours, and they'll take you around the harbor, show you a little bit about sailing and what it's like to be on a world championship boat. Like I said, some of these back here are the condos that were developed after Go Island was sold to the man in Fall River. And because of the causeway, it's now an island open to the public. You don't have to get a special ferry or have your own boat to get across, which really makes these summer homes special and available to everyone. Another interesting boat, we're going to come up here on my right, or my left, excuse me, my left. This is Spartan. Spartan was designed by a man in Bristol. He was the original designer for the 12-meter boats, which we just saw back there in Nefertiti, the World Cup boat. So this was one of the first prototypes for that. There are a few key differences. The bow's a little bit different, and there's less lines rigging up to the top. But Spartan is one of the very first designs of this world-renowned, or these boats that now race in this world-renowned race. As we reach the end of Go Island, you're going to see some of the last condominiums and some of the nicest with the best view of the Newport skyline. One of the most interesting parts of the skyline is that white tower over there, the white cathedral tower. That is the spire to Trinity Church. Trinity Church is actually George Washington's place of worship when he came up here to Newport to do some of his military endeavors. You can actually go in and sit in one of his pews, number 81, I believe. The Queen of England herself did come here for the America's bicentennial celebration, so she was there, and actually in her speech at that visit, she did pardon the American revolutionists for their treason against the crown. That didn't go over too well in England, but nevertheless, we were pardoned. Woo! That spire itself was built by a boat maker. He didn't really have much expertise in architecture or design like that, but he did build it out of wood, which he did have some great expertise in. So that all the way up to the top is built with wood, and it's the highest or the tallest spire in Newport. There was an ordinance put out that nothing else could be built higher. While if you do look on the coastline, some do appear to be higher. They are on top of a hill, so nothing is taller and nothing is more prominent than Trinity Church out there, and that's because it does serve a huge historical value here in Newport. As we round this corner, we're going to be coming out into Narragansett Bay. We are leaving the main harbor portion of the Newport Harbor and exiting the southernmost part of Aquidneck Island. Newport is the southernmost part with Middletown and Portsmouth above it. Narragansett Bay itself is at its deepest point, over 200 feet deep, and over here in the harbor we reach up to depths of 20 plus feet or so. So there's plenty of room for sailboats, plenty of room for huge drafts and draws and all kinds of different vessels here. Scientists say that the harbor itself is some years ago. A huge glacier came through, and as it melted, it cut a space deep into the harbor, and it filled up over the years. The glacier itself left behind stones. I'll point out a little bit later kind of what these stones were used to make, because there are a few pieces here that are made from the stone found naturally in the land. As we come out into the bay, you're going to see a series of tiny sailboats. That's a kind of a mini example of a sailboat race or a regatta. It's actually for a camp here. A bunch of kids will come out and go to sailing camp, and they'll host races and teach kids the art of racing and rigging their own sails and such like that. So sailing stays a big industry here in Newport, and kids are really raised on it from a young age onward. So they'll set out a series of buoys and set up a course, and the fastest group of sailboats to run through that course is going to end up winning that race. You'll probably also notice the Newport Bridge there. It's pretty obvious, but I want to draw your attention to a group of buildings towards the land side of Newport, or this side of the Newport Bridge. That's what was the modern day Naval War College. Back in before it was the War College, it was the location or the home base for the destroyer fleet, as well as a training for other aspiring Navy men and other such military endeavors. So over there you'll see a couple other buildings today. Now is the Naval War College. So the Navy, the Marines, the Army, most branches of the military will send lucky officers here to get a master's degree and further the overall intelligence of the military. They graduate about 600 people every year. So whether it's going to be in engineering or if you want to become a chaplain, you have to go there too, and other various endeavors. On this side of the harbor, we do have the Adirondack too. That's a typical example of another one of the charter boats here. So they'll go out and teach you a little bit about sailing and show you the sights in Newport, but this time on a historical looking sailboat. When the Navy no longer needed the War College, or I mean they still use it now, but back before it was the location for the destroyer fleet. After they pulled out from Newport, 2/3 of Newport's population left because a lot of the military men left as well. So it was a struggling city for a while, but a lot of architectures and city designers got together and they built a lot of the waterfront you see, which now contributes to Newport's tourist industry. So without those tourists, we would be kind of a desolate town with not much going on after the Navy had left. Now I'm going to bring your attention to the bridge back over to this side. The bridge is about 2.5 miles long from end to end. At its very tippy top on the spires, it reaches about 430 feet tall, or 37 stories. Where the cars drive over, the highest apex of the road is 220 something feet. They made it this big so that Navy barges and carriers and other larger sailboats can fit under it without the need for a drawbridge. I'm sure you've all been stuck by a tragic traffic jam behind drawbridges making you late. The bridge itself took 3 years to build. It opened in 1969. It amassed about $61 million worth of construction fees, which is fairly cheap, actually, because there has been a 12-year renovation project, just retouching the bridge, repainting it, that has cost over $125 million. So this renovation project cost over double what it did to build the bridge in the first place. Nowadays, it costs $4 for non-residents to go over, 83 cents for residents to go over, 87, 83, one of the two. But prior to that, you actually got to and from Aquidneck Island in Jamestown through ferry. This ferry was notoriously unreliable. Oftentimes it would get stuck on one side because of weather, or the timing would be off because of strong winds and lousy captains and such. So people were often left stranded on one side or the other, having paid for a ticket. The bridge is much more reliable, barring some construction. It's been open since it was built in 1969. The island underneath the bridge, the one closest to us, that one's known as Rhode Island. Rhode Island used to be a quarantine zone for the Navy. As people would come in, if you had anything as little as a sniffle, they'd put you in the hospital there. You can actually still see the foundations to the hospital. It's the little platform looking thing all the way on the right of the island. There, if you had so much as a cough, you'd be sent there and you either got better or you died. So there's an unmarked grave of over 300 soldiers over there. On the other side of the island, the left side, there is a lighthouse. That is the Rhode Island Lighthouse. That one in particular was built in 1869, and for the next 100 years it was in use, lit day and night by a lighthouse keeper. It only was finally fell into disuse when the bridge opened up in 1969 after 100 years. After that, the government no longer needed it. There was no longer a use for a lighthouse, so they gave the island to Newport with the promise that they would maintain it as a state park. Newport failed to do so. The government repossessed it, and having no use for it, they didn't keep it up. So the lighthouse fell into disarray through various college parties and other misdemeanors. It fell into disarray until finally an organization, a conservationist organization, came together, pulled up enough money, and refurbished the lighthouse. Today you can go into the lighthouse for a week at a time. You can rent it out, and at the end of your stay you can become a certified lighthouse keeper. And because it was rebuilt and maintained by a non-for-profit organization, it is tax deductible, that vacation. During the period of the torpedo factory on Goat Island, they actually used the storage over there. They used to store all the torpedoes and weaponry over there because it was far away from land, so if anything accidentally went off, no harm, no foul, other than that beautiful lighthouse. Peeking out from just under the bridge, you'll see an island more off into the distance. That's Gold Island. That one was initially owned by the Harvard football coach back in the 60s. He won for about 12 years straight the national championship until they changed some rules and he struggled to keep up with them and stopped winning. So he had a bunch of free labor on that island. He kind of built a small, quaint little town using his football players over the summer. And that's his legacy today. I think some people live on it today, not many. And it's still a very isolated, very quaint little place. On the other side of the bridge, there's Jamestown. Jamestown was originally named after King James II. The colonies did it to honor him and revere him. And later on, the Quakers actually moved over to the island. They felt that Newport was too busy, too loud, too full of alcohol and other unfavorable lifestyle, so they spent their summers over here on Jamestown. They spent a lot of money to make it isolated and build it into this quaint little town, and that's where they spent their time when the tourists and sailors and merchants came into Newport to trade their spices and rum. Jamestown was one of the first colonies, actually, and you can take a ferry to and from Jamestown. The ferry is about an hour and a half long, stopping at multiple places. You can get off whenever, come back on. I do believe they stop at Fort Adams, over at Jamestown, and two places over there in an actual town of Newport. As we round this corner here, you're going to see a series of small rocks poking out of the water. Those are known as the dumpling rocks because they do resemble dumplings a little bit, almost in a stew or another soup like that. The biggest of the rock is you can almost always see a type of bird on it. This bird will actually dive into the water to fish and get their meal for the day, but they can't fly after they do that, so they do have to stay on that rock and dry out until they're able to fly off or fish again. The Japanese actually harnessed this unique feature, and when they were drying off and incapable of moving, they'd put a leash around them. And next time they actually went in the water, they'd come up with fish, and the Japanese, having the leash attached to the birds, pull them on in and take the fish right from the jaws of the bird. So those rocks are known as the dumpling rocks. Up on the hill, you're going to notice this house up there, very interesting looking house. That is known as the clingstone house because it does cling to the stones. It was built in 1905 by the Thornton family. They originally had a house on the land, but it was repossessed by the government for military use, and they said, you know what, I'm going to build a house that nobody's ever going to want to take away. And so they built it on these rocks with no tactical advantage whatsoever, and they were right. Nobody wanted to take it away. It stood there, and the family lived in it until the summer of 1938. When the patriarch, Mr. Thornton of the family, died, they vowed to never come back to the house, and they left. Luckily so, because in September of 1938, a big hurricane, the hurricane of the century, swept through New England. It remained in Narragansett Bay for about 3 days or so, with hurricane force winds the whole time. Miraculously, the house still stood after that with only some minor damage. It wasn't destroyed, and obviously you can see the foundation is still up there today. It sat in disarray after the hurricane and misused until someone inquired about the house, asked the city how much it would cost, and found out that he could buy it for back taxes. So from 1938 until when he bought it in the early 90s, it only acquired about $3,600 of back taxes. So he got it, he renovated it, and now today it's almost a resort, and you and your 25 closest friends can go rent that out for $10,000 a week. So that's Clingstone up there. It's said to be one of the most isolated vacation spots there is, with gorgeous views of the harbors, and no one can come bother you unless they have a boat. Back in the tree line over there, you're gonna see this mansion. Looks like it's almost made out of mostly glass. A sculptor actually built that. It's built on the remains of Fort Wetherill. Fort Wetherill used to be up there, and it had guns that were uniquely designed so that they could spring up out of the ground on any enemy threat. And before the enemy could even pinpoint where the gunfire was coming from, they would go back into the ground and disappear, making a huge tactical advantage throughout all the wars. Today, the sculptor built his house up there. It's mostly glass, and he stays up there inspired by the bay and the artwork, and he sculpts, I think, mostly window pane, and he has a whole exhibit somewhere in New York. But this is where he does the majority of his work. On the other side of the sculptor's house, you're going to see a series of two buildings. That used to be the original Fort Dumplings. It was later renamed after a casualty during the Revolutionary War to Fort Wetherill. Their biggest job was to maintain this 2.5 mile long, almost like a steel net during World War II. It kept German submarines from coming into the bay. So they maintained that in addition to developing a radar system. So a lot of radar technology, a lot of sonar stuff was very researched and developed here. Along with torpedoes, sonar, radar, this became a huge military hub for various wars throughout America's history. Now it is a state park. You can go, you can fish, and enjoy the views over there. Following along the coastline, as we begin to turn the corner, some of you can see it now, some of you can't. I'll point it out again when most of you can. There is a house up there called Marabella. It's the dome-shaped house, kind of right over there. That dome-shaped house was another part of the Thornton family who owned the Clingstone house. He built it there, called Marabella. He built his house there because, one, it was his favorite fishing spot. He loved to fish, and that's where he loved to go, so he built a mansion there. And two, because on a very clear day, at the top of his tower, he could see 3 different states from the viewing tower. So like I said, that's that dome-shaped building over there. And this man was said to have more money than God. He did build his own church because he was fairly lazy. He did not want to get up on Sundays and walk to church, so he built a church right in his backyard, hired a minister, and all the other requirements for running a church. And he just went there Sunday mornings and walked right back into his house afterwards. As we begin to turn, I'll point it out to you again. It's that house with the dome up there. That's Marabella. I do believe it's still in the hands of the Thornton family, just long, long descendants of the family. Yeah, the church is still there. It kind of makes you question who got the tithes at the end of that church day. I heard he donated them all to charity, but who really knows? making our turn, I'm going to ask you to keep your eyes all the way down to the end of the shoreline. You're going to see this little spire. It's a little hazy today, so you can't really make out much detail. But that spire out there, it's actually the nation's third oldest lighthouse. It is third oldest only to the Boston Harbor Lighthouse and another one in New York. So the light there actually goes on every 7 or so seconds. They built it there with the promise that it would not ever really shine into Mr. Thornton's view, because he had the watchtower that looks over 3 different states. But that little spire way out there, you can almost see the flash. See, it just went off, so in another 7 seconds it will actually go again. That lighthouse was run by an individual keeper for close to 200 years until they eventually automated it. Up here with the blue Adirondack chairs out here in the lawn. That's actually a resort you can go stay in. You can rent it out. You can be waited on hand and foot by white glove staff. It's listed as travel magazines, like top 10 locations in Newport or something like that. But they do have an infinity pool and other such amenities to go and enjoy, and you do get a beautiful view of the harbor. The sun sets over there in the west, so you get a sunset view every single night. You can see their windows all over the building. You can see the sailboats coming in and out of the bay, and there's some breathtaking ones that do come here. Beyond the grass, the one up there, that is Hammersmith Farm. Hammersmith Farm was originally owned by one of the original colonists. He named it Hammersmith Farm as a kind of a head nod to his original English town of Hammersmith. He became one of the richest men here, Mr. Breton, through livestock. He became one of the biggest livestock producers and sellers here in Newport. And eventually, after he died, the house got passed on and on and on until it ended up in the hands of the Bouvier family. The Bouvier family had a daughter named Jacqueline Bouvier. She enjoyed spending her summers riding her horse Chicklets across the lawn. Chicklets was eventually buried somewhere there in the lawn, and she eventually went on to college in D.C. She had an internship there as well, where she met a Mr. John F. Kennedy. Eventually, she married the man, and they had their reception of 1,200 people here on the lawn, and they all enjoyed the view here. Her and her mother actually built this spire-looking thing, this little cottage up here as a private getaway. It's 4 stories tall. There is an elevator in it, and when JFK spent his time here, that is where the Secret Service would stay. As each story goes up, it loses about 4 square feet of space, but today it still serves as a little getaway for people. The house was made into a museum eventually, but nobody visited, and it did fall into disarray. So now a man from New York who was rich enough to rebuild it eventually bought it, and it's more of a privately owned house now. the next interesting house is this yellow one you can see peeking out from back there. That is the summer White House of President Eisenhower. So we had JFK summer White House over here and President Eisenhower summer White House over here. He was welcomed into Newport on 3 different occasions, and they eventually renamed Washington Square into Eisenhower Square after him. He just loved it so much here. He was a very big fisherman. He did not actually fish in salt water, though. He was a fly fisher, so a freshwater guy. So he actually built 2 ponds out further in Aquidneck Island in the Portsmouth area. It is said that he had a Navy diver go down each day and make sure that he did 100% catch a fish each day, whether it was a hook and a fish up to the line themselves. I don't think that's very true, though. Further along, you can see people over there enjoying the access to the water and walking along trails. That little kid sprinted. Look at him go. That's actually a state park. There's 2.5 miles worth of trails. It's open from dawn until dusk. Like I said, it's run by the state, and the trails are free to individuals. There is a bunch of parking back there, and as the sun sets, you get gorgeous views of the sunset back here in the west, and great views of the ocean, and like I said, the sailboats coming in and out. Most of it today does have a lot of military housing. You'll see a lot of the houses back there on Ocean Drive, like the mansions I pointed out. But there is some military housing here. The Naval War College has asked that if they're to come here and get their master's degree, they move here. They'll relocate their families here for a year or so, and they'll live in that housing back there. Not a bad place to come and get your education. Not the prettiest of beaches, but there is a beach there. It's like I said, public state park, so you can go there. You don't really have to pay for it, and enjoy the water and the sun like those 2 individuals. The next site we're going to see is Fort Adams. It is the biggest fort in North America, or the biggest coastal fort in North America. I'll tell you a little bit more about it as we get closer, but its history kind of started out of a unnecessary need, per se, which is a little bit of an oxymoron. But after the Revolutionary War, where Narragansett Bay was attacked on multiple occasions, and then again in the War of 1812 when Narragansett Bay was once again attacked, President John Quincy Adams felt the need that we needed a fort here. So he commissioned this fort to be built by 2,000 Irish and Scottish stonemasons who were an expert in their field. So this is Fort Adams right here, like you see all the stone over here. It took them 30 years to build. Obviously, it's one of the biggest forts there is here on the coast of North America, and it's all made out of stone. It's built to hold 2,000 plus soldiers and their families, as well as 468 cannons, or 2,000 plus soldiers. The cannons were actually built into the building on 3 different levels, one to attack the hull of a ship, one to attack the deck of a ship, and one to attack the mast of the ship. So you can see those levels right here through the little cannon slot. But like I said, it took 30 years to build. So by the end of those 30 years, the Navy came in to inspect the fort, and they declared it obsolete. The technology had already surpassed what the fort was built to handle, and it would not be very effective in any kind of war or gunfire. So the reason why you probably haven't heard of Fort Adams is because they never fired a single shot. It never experienced any battle because it was so obsolete after it was built. Today, like I said, state park, so you can go in and you can take tours of it. It was mostly run by steam and coal engines of the time, so you can go in, you can kind of see how they kept it going, kept the electricity in for the families, and powered everything involved in it. They give you tours, both self-guided and narrated tours of the tunnels and the fort on the inside. There is 6 feet deep of building all the way to the inside. You got 3 feet of brick and then 3 feet of stone protecting the fortress there. And on the lawn right here, this is the typical location for the Newport's Jazz and Folk Festival, one of the biggest tourist attractions here. It brings in about 10,000 people on both weekends each summer. Unfortunately, it has been canceled this year due to COVID-19, but typically for 3 days straight, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you'll see 10,000 people lining this lawn, and over 1,000 different boats and flotation devices out here just to listen to the artists sing. It's a great festival, lots of good food. When they don't have the festivals there, they do other events such as a clam bake-off where you get world-renowned chefs judging local artisans and chefs and their clam bakes and other seafood dishes. You can see, like it is, I said, state park. You can go in there, fly your kites, enjoy your day in the sun on the beach, walk along the trails. So Fort Adams is a great place to stay. At the very end of Fort Adams, you're going to see the modern lighthouse. It's honestly super sad to see how a lighthouse has devolved over time, but this tower right here with the number 2 all over it, that is a modern day lighthouse. They have electrified foghorns and electrified light and some cameras on there for security purposes. But as opposed to being a one-man kept, constantly tended lighthouse, we now have that automated tower. Modern technology. As we round the fort here, we're going to come to the other side. This is typically the side of the fort where the officers and their family would stay. They were divided into several different rooms, but they were engineered specifically so that in the case of an emergency or an attack, the rooms could be taken down and built into one big unit. This was better for defense, so nobody would get trapped inside, and they could make sure everybody was accounted for at the end of the attack. In addition to that, you no longer have space for cannons. If you look over at the building, there's going to be a lot of different long, narrow slits. This is for rifles, so 3 or 4 riflemen would stack on top of each other and stick the nose of their rifles out of those slits and shoot at any possible attack. In addition to that, you will see that the roof of it is grass. This is because grass and dirt actually absorb more of an impact than stone would. So this was a protective measure. They used to maintain it with, when the federal government owned the fort, they maintained it with these Himalayan mountain goats. But when they gave it to the state of Rhode Island, they actually used more locally bred goats, and they were not as gifted, so they had the habit of falling off, so they had to cut that program out pretty quickly. Like I said, you can see the slits. There's a better view of those there on the side of the building. I'm sure some of you are probably noticing this pirate ship looking boat. Do we have any guesses how old that is? Shout it out.
1931.
1931, so this kid says almost 90 years old. It's actually only 7 though. It's only 7 years old. Good guess though. It's actually a rendition of the boat that the General Oliver Hazard Perry commanded during his time in the Army. So this boat is now known as the Oliver Hazard Perry. It now serves as a training ship. It does go out. It goes up and down the East Coast at various times of the year. But people will go up there and they'll learn how to rig a bigger sailboat and maintain that. Oliver Hazard Perry himself, him and his family were pretty big to the U.S. His brother, Matthew Perry, not to be confused with the actor from Friends. Matthew Perry actually did a lot for Japanese food industry here in America. Originally, we weren't allowed to trade with Japan, but he eventually opened up the deals and opened up the minds of the American government to trading with the Japanese. So that he is the reason why we now have sushi or Nintendo or Mitsubishi or any other Japanese-influenced companies. These docks here are actually specifically built. Half of this microphone doesn't work, so I've got to figure out which half does. They were actually specifically built to hold boats during the America's Cup race. Like I said, that's the race I mentioned that brings in boats from everywhere. Newport's own boat won it last year. But on any given summer where the race is not canceled, you'll see close to 20-25 boats just lined up here, stacked and piled on top of, well, not piled, that would ruin the boat, but they're stacked up against each other, making Newport one of the sailing capitals of the world, like I said. Over on this side to my left, there are a series of floating docks. These floating docks are pretty prime real estate. In 1999, one of these floating docks were sold on eBay for $150,000. To put that in perspective, in the 1960s, Rhode Island was sold for $160,000 in the auction, and today it's worth over $3 billion in real estate. So something like this, that's pretty prime real estate to be spending $150,000 on those. But if you don't want to spend that much money and you want to keep your boat here in Newport, you could put it out there on a mooring. Those moorings attach to a chain which attach to an anchor way at the bottom of the ocean to keep things steady. You can put your boat out there. There's a lot more space available out in the water than there is up against land, so this allows more and more people to come here, keep their boats, and keep the spirit of sailing alive here in Newport. Speaking of keeping the spirit alive, hold that thought. Interestingly enough, that is the Rum Runner. The Rum Runner is a typical boat that would have smuggled rum to and from Jamestown and Aquidneck Island during the times of the Prohibition. So as you can see, it's a very low to the ground kind of boat. It goes really, really fast, and it really could outrun the government boats trying to track those down and chase them down. Sorry, just saw that and thought that was interesting. But keeping the spirit alive, the spirit of sailing alive in Newport, this is Sail Newport. They give opportunities for all levels of sailing, all ages, to actually go out and learn how to sail and experience sailing again. So they have a bunch of camps for the kids, and actually Rhode Island public schools, part of their curriculum is sailing. So they will come over here for a few days during a semester and learn how to sail in their middle school years. In addition to that, they do have a couple programs. It's called Sail to Prevail, and it's for any wheelchair-bound individuals or other disabled individuals. They can go to learn to sail. They have specifically rigged sailboats to make that happen. They also allow blind sailors to sail, which I think is pretty interesting. They will provide you the eyes through one of their trained instructors, and the sailor will come out and just feel the freedom of being on the water again. Back there you can see the other side of the Eisenhower House, but like I said, this is all state park. So there's this little beach over here. It's one of the only free beaches in Newport, so you don't have to pay for parking or pay for a pass over there. This little low to the ground building back here looks like it's made out of stone. That's actually the mule barn during the Revolutionary War, Civil War, and onward. That's where the infantry kept their livestock and their cavalry there. So that's the location where they kept all those horses back there in that low building. Now it's just kind of storage for sailboats for Sail Newport, but there's still some cool historical facts over there. Up on the hill over here, we're going to see the largest privately owned mansion in Newport. It's owned by a man, a personal defense or personal injury lawyer up in Boston, and he acquired it from a series of unfortunate accidents. Originally, it was owned by an individual named Felix. He was the sculptor of the statue of raising the flag at Iwo Jima, and he eventually lost the house through not paying taxes, and then it moved on to another Rhode Island senator. He died and passed away, giving the house to his son, who was unfortunately addicted to drugs and lost all the money through that. So now the man bought it for really cheap, the lawyer bought it for cheap, and it remains the largest private home in New England. Or not New England, Newport, my bad. Up here you're going to see a house that looks almost like a castle. On the back half of it, it looks more like more of a cottage type of mansion that is owned by the nephew of J.P. Morgan. This man married into the Vanderbilt family, and him and his wife wanted two different styles of houses. He wanted more of a castle feel to his, a very European, Scottish castle, and she wanted a more like summer cottage kind of mansion. So they compromised and made the house half castle, half cottage mansion. They are said to be the epitome of husband-wife compromise. Down here, this little boathouse is actually a little interesting piece of land. It was gifted to a man who had no beach access, no water access for his 217-foot yacht. So it was gifted to him, and he goes down there to check it out, and he realizes, this land is too small to turn my car around. So rather than get mad or get upset or give up, he built this little boathouse right here, which has a unique feature on the inside. He was very big in the railroad industry, so he used his knowledge and expertise to build a turntable, or a turnstile, which would turn his car around using steam and other types of engines. So once he would get his car there, he'd park it and he'd turn it around so it'd go right back up the hill. Kind of a joke on the guys who originally played a joke on him. The next mansion worth mentioning is this one right here. This is Bonnie Crest. It was originally owned by the founder of Worcestershire sauce, so if you look up at the house, the chimneys are shaped like a Worcestershire sauce bottle. They built a Tudor-style house. It was a family of 3 that lived there, a husband, a wife, and a smaller son. When they finally moved into the house after building it, the wife looked at it and said, "It's too small." She said that unironically because she felt that the dining room was too small to fit her 200 plus friends for all of her events and parties. So they ended up redoing it and remodeling to make it a little bit bigger for the wife. Now it is split up into a series of summer condos, so it's not one person who lives there anymore. It's summer condos. This mansion back here is starting to peek around the corner of the trees. This is now known as Harbor Court or New York Yacht Club. It is the location of the New York Yacht Club, even though we are in Newport. It was originally owned by the Brown family, the same Brown family who started or founded Brown University. They had a son, Mr. William Brown. Shortly after his birth, his dad and his uncle both died, leaving him to be the richest baby in the world. He grew up in the house and grew up to love art. He, instead of going to Brown University, he did end up going to Harvard to get a fine arts degree. And with that degree, he was enlisted in the military, or I think he was in the Marines. And during World War II, he became the leader of the Monument Men, which went into Nazi Germany to help recover lost art, and that the Germans took to maintain and control the power they had over everyone else. So Mr. Brown was part of that. He came back to the States after the war and finding all the lost art, and he became the Commodore of the New York Yacht Club in New York. He loved sailing, spent his days on the water, and eventually died peacefully on a sailboat. 6 years later, his wife died, and after looking at both of their wills, they found a secret clause that gifted their house to the New York Yacht Club. So the yacht club relocated to up here, and now they spend their days here hosting huge regattas, huge sailboat races, drawing in lots and lots of people from lots and lots of sailors from all over the world. So that's Mr. Brown's legacy here in Newport. Over here, you'll see a huge dock that connects the land to this little lighthouse building over here. It's originally called Lime Rock Light, but it's since been repurposed to be Ida Lewis Yacht Club. Ida Lewis became one of the first female lighthouse keepers in America. Her dad had a heart attack, leaving him severely incapable of keeping after the lighthouse. So her mom would look after her dad, and she would be left to tend to the lighthouse duties. She was about 5 feet tall, weighing about 110 pounds, soaking wet. Very tiny lady, but she did the duties day and night, often rowing her siblings across for them to get to school, which is a huge feat for a tiny little woman. In addition to that, she's said to have saved over 18 lives. If you look up at the red flag up there on top of the mast, you'll see 18 stars. Those stars represent the life she's credited with saving, although it's rumored that she saved over 30. She would hear someone in distress and she'd row out fearlessly to grab them. So today that is the Ida Lewis Yacht Club in remembrance of her and all that she did for women in the industry. Interesting thing worth seeing is going to be this boat over here that we're coming up to on my left. This is called Farallone. Farallone is a typical example of a military boat from 100 years ago. So this would be the type of boat that's chasing down the rum running boats that I pointed out to you guys over by Sail Newport. So this one, as you can see, it's a lot less sleek, less low to the water line, so it couldn't move as fast and it could hardly ever catch the rum running. You can see that it says CG 290 on the side. That indicates that it is a Coast Guard boat. This has never actually served in the Coast Guard. Instead, it did a stint in a movie about the Prohibition, so that's why it has the CG 290 decorations written all over it. It's also called Farallone because it did a stint out in San Francisco, taking prisoners and workers alike to and from Alcatraz. It's said that that's the boat that took Al Capone over to Alcatraz during his last moments of freedom. Over towards the shoreline, you're going to see what we call Kings Park and the Stone Pier. You'll see this kind of unfinished pyramid statue over there. That's kind of a monument to all the Scottish and Irish stonemasons here that's labored for years and years and years to make Fort Adams and a couple other sites up there in the town. So that's their monument to them. And in front of that pyramid statue, you're going to have a statue of General Rochambeau. He was a French general, and without him, we would have not won the Civil War, or we would have not won the Revolutionary War. America was really struggling to get guns and funds and ships and all of that stuff to help defeat the British who were occupying the Newport at the time. So George Washington cried out to the French, and Rochambeau answered the call, bringing down a bunch of ships and a lot of forces to help turn the tide of the war and eventually helping us win the Revolutionary War. So without them, we would still, well, I mean, obviously I don't know, but we would still have a lot of more English influence in our government. Back there is another public beach, a lot still smaller, but just an interesting sight to see if you want a beach day here in Newport. Towards the shore on this side of things, there is a transparent looking building. That's called IRIS. That stands for International Yacht Restoration School. So kids, or not kids, adults, people who are interested in yacht restoration, or like classic yachts, wooden yachts, will go there and do a 2-year program where they will learn about wood bending and machine building and engine repair and stuff like that, so they can help contribute to the huge